We're getting used to it. It's me.
So good afternoon, everybody. Thank you all for joining us at the session today. I am Ngozi Akinyele, and I'm the head of strategic brand management at Union Bank. Just before I bring up our panelists, let me just let you know that Brain Enterkin, who's on the panel, of course, today has to step out early. So we're going to just make sure we, like David said a few moments ago, bombard her with all of the questions before she goes off. But thank you all for joining us. Whenever there's a session like this and there are parallel discussions going on, I'm always very grateful when people pop into the breakout sessions that I'm moderating, because obviously you've had to make a choice based on your interest, and I'm glad that you chose to be with us on this panel that is tagged Relevant Education, the Pathways to Progress. I said, my name is Ngozi Akinyele, and I work at Union Bank. At Union Bank, education is a powerful term, because for us, we see it as, there's no silver bullet, but we see education as a tool that has the of being a social catalyst on the social impact side, but also an economic driver. Because we all know, and I think it's clear to us, the impact that education can have on the socio-economic front, but also on the economic front. Education helps us create economic opportunities. The more economic opportunities there are, the more jobs, the more people have disposable income, the more people are able to buy milk and soap, and the more people have money to bank with us. You know, so it's not just, education is not just this fluffy, good to have thing. So whether you are a socialist or you wear the capitalist hat, education is a powerful tool to drive the economy and society forward. And that's why education is really, really close to our hearts. And I'm truly pleased to be on this panel today as we discuss, particularly for Africa, we discuss the pathways to progress. So without much ado, I'll just, start off, by opening the session and asking Brain right away. But before I do that, let me just mention that we're going to try, this is a 35-minute session. We've already done about 5 minutes, I think, in the interest. Let me just let us know that we would try to have questions and a Q&A right after we have the talks. So please just drop your questions. When it's time, I'll let you know, just so that we don't scroll away and your questions go away, because I'm not sure how to pin the questions here. So very quickly, I'll just go on to Brain now, and I'll say, so for Brain, you've worked in Africa for a bit, Brain Enterkin. Before I go on, let me actually just introduce them. I'm guessing ahead of myself. So our panelists today are, first of all, Brain Enterkin, who's the Chief Strategy Officer at Watson Institute in Boulder, US. And also I have on this panel, Mrs. Folashade Adefisayo, who's the Honorable Commissioner of Education in Lagos State, Nigeria. And finally, I have David Holland, who is the Education Strategy Manager for Asia and Japan at HP. So please join me as we welcome our panelists formally to the panel today. Thank you so much. I know you're clapping in your home, wherever you are. I imagine that you're clapping. Thank you. So let me just jump right into it. Like I was going to ask Brain, as we delve into the critical subject of charting pathways to progress in education, how would you assess the current state of development in education, particularly amidst the challenges that we faced in this very interesting year amid the COVID-19 pandemic?
Is that for me?
First, Bryn.
Please.
Wow, no easy questions from Madame Ngozi. So I mean, my context is limited to East Africa, Uganda specifically, as well as the United States. I will say it's an honor to be here today, and Nigeria is such a leader. I'm excited to hear what the comments are on this side. of Nigeria. But I will say the implications of COVID on the education sector have been immense. In Uganda specifically, there has been a mass lockdown, meaning no one can leave their homes. And because of the lack of access to internet, we've had a really significant series of events that have taken place, mostly to the economy and to the education sector primarily, but I mean really to every single sector in the country of Uganda. And I can't speak on behalf of the Ugandan people. I'm not Ugandan, as you can probably tell, but the loss has been really difficult, and we're really concerned on the deficits that have happened due to developmental milestones not being met. But what I am excited about is that the government recognizes this and is rapidly moving to figure out innovative ways. I will say the organization that I founded, the African Soup, is actually going door to door with education packets and finding ways to work with a radio station to bring education materials to students. And that has been a way to kind of bridge the gap, but the bridge is a very weak bridge. It would be like a rope bridge versus like a concrete bridge going across a fierce river that is COVID. And I think that, you know, what we're hoping to do is to work with other nation states to really draw on best practices for how to deal with working on recovering from this developmental gap that students have really experienced, some of which have lost an entire year of education. So that's my submission to your question.
Thank you, Brain. And just to follow on from there, I was going to ask, you know, at least if I can squeeze in one or two more questions, would be, you know, what are some of the solutions, and you've already said touching on them, what are some of the solutions that you're seeing emerge in the regions where, of course, you have context for? What are some of those solutions you see emerging? And what exactly might be the potential to scale those things, understanding that there is a challenge, there's a unique challenge we're faced with right now in delivering education, but that doesn't take away from the fact that Africa is challenged even beyond the unique challenges that we have. How do we scale or accelerate some of those solutions if you feel they are viable for the future?
Absolutely. I will say that Africa has been the leader in leapfrogging, meaning Africa as a continent has figured out innovative ways to come up with solutions that people in the West are envious of. I mean, a big example of this has been the leapfrog from over landlines, phones that have been in people's homes. You went directly to cell phones, directly to data on cell phones in a way that kind of demonstrates to the rest of the world that you don't have to take this very linear process to technology. And I think that what we're seeing in parts of Africa is very innovative ways to address this concern. And one of them is specifically learning through cellular devices. In the West, what we've been doing is really leaning on Zoom and technology solution platforms that have existed. What I'm seeing coming out of East Africa, specifically Uganda, has been ways to work together in these things called pods, like groups of people where you get together and you communicate over a specific concern or lesson through a platform that's on your phone. And that, because computers aren't as accessible and whatnot, that hasn't become a limitation, but really it's becoming creative of leapfrogging over computers into cellular applications, really being the way in which students solve the problem for themselves rather than tech giants in Silicon Valley, USA. So in terms of specific applications, I look to people like David who really do work in the tech sector, but that would be my reference point.
Thank you. So I think I have just one more question that I can try to squeeze in. I know we're now at the 10-minute mark for you, Brain. And so I think about 2020 as a very pivotal year. Apart from everything that has happened, we're now 10 years away from achieving our SDGs. And I think about SDG 4 as the most critical, one of the most critical for this environment. If there was one thing we could say from today, we should stop or decelerate, and then another thing we should start or accelerate, what will those two things be? first will be what do we need to stop or decelerate from today? And then secondly, what do we need to start or accelerate from today so that Africa can actually have a better chance of succeeding and meeting this critical goal, which is goal 4, that addresses quality of education?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really critical question. I'm glad that you raised it. One thing that I would like to note is that 200 years ago, for every 5 people, there was 1 horse. This is going to sound like a funny analogy, but 1 horse for every 5 people in the world. This is crazy. Meaning horses 200 plus years ago were what people thought of as the only way to get from point A to point B. And horses were a huge industry because of it. And now when you look at the continent of Africa and what has been happening, kind of again, leapfrogging over technologies, leapfrogging over limitations and being innovative and creative and resourceful is an inspiration for the rest of the world, truly. You're not stuck in what every other part of the world is doing, but rather saying, I need to find solutions. We need to find solutions that work on this context, in this context. And in terms of what to stop and what to start, I think the one thing that has to start is the one thing that has to stop, I'll start with stop. The one thing that has to stop is I think that Africans have to stop comparing themselves to any other context in the world and start recognizing that Africa has the most resourceful land in the entire global context. The resourcefulness of actually the minerals and the things that are found on the continent of Africa are immense. And everyone is jealous, honestly, of what Africa has. And I think that when having lived in East Africa and traveled across the continent, what I recognize is that Africans sometimes compare to the other parts of the world and try to draw on best practices. But one of the most impressive things I've ever seen is when Africans recognize we have what it takes to be the leading continent. And what we are going to do is we are going to transform the education sector. We are going to transform, the renewable energy sector. The renewable energy that's coming out of East Africa is incredible, and it should be an inspiration to the rest of the world. So my recommendation is that Africans need to stop comparing Africa to the rest of the world, and the rest of the world needs to look at Africa as the leader. And so many of these sort of like innovations and leapfrogging opportunities that are taking place, where in the United States, we're still stuck in the horse age, where we are stuck in industries that we can't get unstuck from. And Africans have the opportunity to create the new industries that we will look to as leaders. And I think education is a good example of one of those. So that would be my what to stop and what to start. But that's a really hard question. So I appreciate you raising it.
Thank you for weaving nicely together. I know we have to say bye now. So thank you so much, Brain. Thank you. And I really want to appreciate the great work that you did at African Soup. I saw some of the footage. Amazing, amazing work. Well done. And I'm sure it's bye as well from our panelists, but I'm sure we'll look for opportunities to connect, like David was saying before we started the session. Thank you once again.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Brain. Thanks for the opportunity. So let me just go on now and sort of recalibrate, to Mrs. Adefisaya and David, who are still on the session with me. Thank you for not abandoning me. Thank you for staying with us in this session. I'll just take a step back and direct this next question to Mrs. Adefisaya. I get the impression that lots of people on the outside of education see the very staggering statistics, and it almost feels like no progress made in years. And so whenever I get the opportunity to ask, questions to someone who is in the sector, I would often ask, from your perspective, what is your assessment of the rate of growth and development? Because you are in it, you are in the trenches day to day, and you are in a better position to let us know how much progress we're really making, and does 2030 look plausible? Does it even look achievable in terms of the metrics that had been set for the quality of education goal under
Well,
the
I hope you don't
SDGs?
mind if I limit my discussion to my actual portfolio, which is Lagos State. I cannot speak for the rest of the country. Okay, so talking about Lagos State,
Sure.
I think we are on course. The challenges are daunting, but I think we are, one of the greatest problems we have in Lagos, of course, is immigration. And you know, it is reckoned that 80 people come to Lagos every minute and they don't return to where they come from. So the population is growing at a remarkable, unbelievable rate, and is stretching all facilities to such an extent that we don't even know how many people are coming in every day. And we are now trying to collect data on the number of people coming in, and they are not coming in through a regular main road or an airport. They're coming in through creeks, through at least 4 different or 5 different ways into Lagos. There's so many of them, but I will say, so that is stretching our educational facilities, and that's one of our major problems. But as for the possibility that we will get to where we want to get to, I think we will. During this pandemic, we found out a lot of things. It was a terrible thing to happen to the world, and I'm not glossing over it by any means whatsoever. But again, it had its own, it brought to the fore certain things. Number one, we hadn't invested sufficiently in education in the state. And it brought to the fore, especially the fact that we hadn't invested sufficiently in technology to support teaching and learning. Because when this was happening, many, especially the top private schools, it's all right, we'll just move online, let the children stay at home, and so on and so forth. Though I must say that if you study it very well, in many instances, this was just replicating the pedagogy of the classroom online. So it was not a radical change in methodology. It was still the same lecture method and so on, but not really anything radical about the type of way the way they were teaching. There was very little. It was still teachers sitting, children sitting behind a Zoom screen, and teachers lecturing basically. So I still think that we have a long way to go in that respect. But for our public schools, we had a big problem, because it's not just that we had, many of our schools didn't have internet. The children were at home, so we didn't need the internet in school. But what was significant was that, I'm so sorry, I think there's some noise somewhere, but please pardon me. I'm at home, like I said, and there's some work going on. So a lot of our schools, the children just didn't have any access to any device that could get them onto the internet. They couldn't afford data either. So the problem was, how long is this thing going to last? Some people said, well, maybe 2 weeks and we'll all be back. But I just felt, and a group of us felt in the ministry, that this is not a 2-week affair. And so we said, we cannot allow this learning slide to occur. We cannot allow this gap to occur. Now, what are we going to do about it? So we started looking for the technology that could be readily available to the children wherever they were. And that was why we started off with radio and television. And you won't believe it, but there were children who could not buy radio sets. And so again, we had groups of people who supported us donating radio sets, and we gave children in faraway places where they could at least listen. Because a lot of the research during that period from India, from Nigeria and other countries suggested that the radio was actually the most effective way of reaching children living in poverty. I find it difficult to say that, but children living in poverty, that radio is probably the most effective way, because they really cannot afford data. But we knew that, radio is one-way traffic. So how do we know that the children are really learning? And that was when we knew that we just had to take it beyond that, and also start to look for online resources and online capabilities. And again, we had the same problem. So we teamed up with a number of organizations. They donated devices. We got telco to give us free internet for quite a while. Some banks were involved, not Union Bank, Ngozi, not Union Bank. I'll say that in public. So some banks were involved. They gave us sets. They gave us devices that the students could use. And we had a website where they could go to, and we uploaded our whole curriculum on it. curriculum, a few notes, lecture notes, and so on, videos, and so on, so that this could improve they could learn on their own. And we also had chat rooms where they could chat with their teachers. And we were careful because we didn't want them going on to other websites. So we're very careful to ensure that the devices actually had very little on them. And the internet window was very limited as well. So we were able to do that. And a lot of the teachers too started working with the children on unusual media like Instagram, like Telegram, and which I found fascinating, that because I would have thought that these were rather static ways of learning, but apparently they were able to get through to their students on a daily basis. And at the end of when we started WAEC exams on the 5th of September, we now had an independent monitoring group that went in to find out what the children were doing during the lockdown. Did they really go on to these websites? Were they really able to use these devices and so on? And to our pleasant surprise, we found that at least 70% of them were on it. But that shows that there's still 30%, and that's still significant. I think we are happy for the 70%, but you're also concerned about the 30% that just couldn't access this. So I think it's forced us into a state where we have no choice but to invest. And so I think that is what this has done. And going forward, we'll continue investing in ensuring that as many children as possible have access to learning wherever they are. Yeah,
absolutely. I think that's a brilliant segue into what David covers. So David, you cover education strategy for Asia, for Japan, and HP. And I could see your eyebrows arching because I think it was maybe not something you don't know, but then coming into the reality of the challenges that children face in accessing education today. We've seen, and from what Mr. Debisaya has said, there's a lot of disruption going. Everyone is trying their hands on everything they can find to just get education going. How do we then, use technology to sort of channel all of this disruption that is happening and actually galvanize our thinking, our efforts towards making sure that this disruption that is happening now then channel driving the sector and impact towards 2030?
Yeah, great. And we had so many good questions in the chat as well. And hopefully I can speak to a couple of them. So working for a technology company, as I do, and I dedicate my life to education, it's sort of what I'm going to do to my last dying breath, because the one thing that we know through this crisis, so just observing what COVID-19's really done, so putting aside just the disruption to classrooms, we know that economically we're all in a bad situation. So it set economies back significantly. So we aren't trading, we aren't doing things. What it's revealed for us is that education is the lifeblood of a country. It literally is the pathway in which we raise up generations to do the transformation that we started talking about at the beginning with Bryn and with others, and even just the social entrepreneur aspect of this conference. It's about bringing those people up and then transforming your community and your country. And so this pipeline is disrupted. So even if we go back to our ordinary classes, what it's revealed to us is a need to absolutely accelerate, because we've got to we've got to repair the harm to the human capital funnel that we have in education that's been disrupted in some places for 9 months almost, and may go on for longer. And that has really awful repercussions, even once we get back on our feet. So there's this need to accelerate. Before COVID-19, we also had incredible opportunities looming and incredible tragedy. Opportunities in the form of the world of work is absolutely changed as we know it. And we know the education systems are struggling to meet the needs of employers, and also even just to take opportunity around opportunities for entrepreneurship at a very small scale, but a global reach. So never has there been in the history of the world an opportunity for those with digital access to start a business. This is a thing that is just incredible. So we want more of our communities to have access to that. And currently throughout the world, doesn't matter which country you go to, developing or developed, this is hard, very, very hard problem, but one we cannot walk away from. So that's the context. We have this incredible opportunity. We understand that education systems, wherever they are, have been built on some very good things that have served us well that absolutely need to change. So how are we going to do that? So COVID's really pulled that out. It's pulled out all the things we mentioned before around inequity. So where does technology play a role? Well, it's always played a role, whatever the technology is, whether it's digital or not, to address firstly the actual needs of a community. And if I frame this up in terms of where technology interventions go well and where they don't go so well, there's probably three things. And HP, we've been working with a lot of researchers, most recently Brookings Institute, to try and capture this in a way which educators, policymakers, people in communities, and particularly social entrepreneurs can kind of take this as a lens to think about tech, because it's very attractive to think we can put computers, for instance, in the hand of every child, and that's somehow going to make a difference. And tragically, every country and every place that's done that, including my own home country, Australia, has seen massive negative impacts in learning when you do this. There's some simple reasons for that. But if I highlight the three things, firstly, it's really understanding the needs, and I'd say even the desire of the community. So thinking about the context of need, or the direction that people in a community want to go in terms of their education and what that means to them. So it's not necessarily about entering a fully digital world and changing your city into or your village into something that looks like another country, but rather what are the values that you have. Values is so important. So firstly, we have to understand the needs. So in terms of education, that could be access to teachers or quality instruction, all of those things. We need to understand the infrastructure that's there. That's absolutely the teachers. It's 70% of most education economies. Are they prepared, or where are they at? And of course, the infrastructure of the schools, which includes all the basic stuff like electricity. Then capacity, right? So all of these things gives us a bit of a lay of the land, but it's really going to inform the next bit, which is then to look out, and this is where social entrepreneurship does an amazing job, really surveying the best available evidence on interventions that match those conditions. So really understanding that it's contextual. Different places, different spaces and people will need different things. And the wonderful world we live in right now is that we have so many examples of amazing interventions, and Bryn mentioned a few, and we've heard of a few more locally in Lagos. And we can start to see these things in the right context can work. And so they become the basis of evidence for change. And then finally, we need to actually take those and then iterate them and pilot them and closely monitor the results of those innovations before they're scaled up. So those are the things. Now, that's how technology plays the best role in these sorts of transformations, if that makes sense. So definitely, yeah. So, and that, look, and then you get to look at what are the actual education opportunities that technology has brought about. So right now, here's a provocation for you. For any nation or community that wants to, there's greater than 4 million cybersecurity jobs up for grabs, and a good percentage of those don't rely on you being in the location of the work. So that could mean that for a country, if you had 20,000 people skilled up, and by the way, you can skill people in less than 12 months, that would conservatively represent $1 billion in income coming into the country. Yeah, and sitting on your balance of trade and all those good things. But that's sort of the world of opportunity that's there. And I think people have said before, how about African countries taking a lead on that? Well, the good news is you can. So there you go. I'll leave you with that. Any more questions?
It's really powerful. We have so many questions coming in, and I know we cannot take all of them at this rate. Sure. But I think that it's powerful because you've gone from talking about education to the economic opportunities that education eventually, gives you. And that for us, I believe, is the way we define quality of education in this region. Education that allows you go from learning to actually earning. So I would just, wrap up by asking you the same question I asked Bryn, because I think we've lost Mrs. Adefisai. Today, we look at the challenge of 2030 and we look at goal for the quality of education. What must we stop doing today, or what must we decelerate today? One thing, and then what is one thing that we must start or accelerate if we're going to achieve our goal for within this region?
Ngozi, I'm still there. Were you asking me?
Did you hear me, David?
I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay.
I'll go.
Did you hear my question?
Second. I'll go second. Or was
it for
me?
No. You
was it for me?
Mrs. on the call. Yeah, it's just you.
Oh, okay. Okay, me.
No,
okay.
I'm still there.
Yeah, she's still there.
I'm still there.
Would you like to answer that one?
No, I didn't hear the
I think we've lost her.
Preoccupied with her saying that.
So it's just you, David.
Oh, okay.
You're gonna have to go first.
Okay, I'll go first. Okay. So the one thing that we need to do absolutely is collaborate. So some of the most exciting projects that we're seeing is when we connect some of these amazing incubated projects where we're doing something very, very innovative and it's got a lot of promise, and we're building research behind that. So we're grabbing research, people who do research like universities in a country. So we've got someone to do some observational research to get evidence, and we're helping with the social entrepreneurs and that funding build the evidence to help the confidence for policymakers and governments to confidently invest in a solution and scale it. Because at the end of the day, and sometimes I like to use the word the people of a country as opposed to the government, because that's what we really want, right? We want them to invest in their future, but the way forward is to de-risk, because education's political for a whole bunch of good reasons and a few bad ones.
Yes.
Because it's very risky and no one wants to make a mistake. So what we see we want to do more of is that collaboration. We know it works, and certainly one of the other pieces of collaboration is getting the largest industries or economic contributors to a community or a government to be signatories of the solution when it's got the evidence, because that again helps build the confidence for the people or the government sitting to take the step forward. And that first process really de-risks everyone. So we're not using public money, that's great, but we're also not wasting, well, I won't say wasting, a lot of foundations and NGOs and social entrepreneurs do amazing work that never scales. So that's my first answer. And the second one, which is let's collaborate and build this ecosystem, because we're starting to see incredible stuff done. And then the second thing is, let's not do any more things that are amazing that never scale, right? Let's make that commitment. Let's decide today that when we see brilliance, we gather around and we say, this could actually change a nation or a community for the better. And so it's sort of on us to actually investigate and really look to that as a possibility. So that there's plenty of other things I can say do more of and do less of or stop doing. But I think for the purpose of this event, gathering around our social innovators and saying, wow, give us a look at what you're doing in education. Does it have the promise of scale, as I said, to match the needs of certain situations? And then let's gather government and industry together and incubate that and see if we can build evidence for a policy change.
Absolutely. I think I just have time for maybe one question. And so thank you for all of those who've been responding to the questions in the chat, because we really cannot keep up. Someone says, what would be your recommendations to social entrepreneurs in the education sector on getting support and funding. And I think that this is coming on the back of you saying we need to scale. And I'm sure as people think about scale, they think about funding, they think about the right operating models. So in terms of support and funding, it'll be important for you to take on this question, understanding that I think we have a room largely full of social entrepreneurs,
yeah,
who are with social entrepreneurship as a means to drive economic development. So please take that question.
Yeah, sure. So one of the big pieces of work, again, around de-risking and helping to build confidence in investment. This goes for private investment, or it could be from the World Bank or whatever it is for a project. It's about trying to link the positive outcomes.
I'm so sorry. I don't know what happened, but I can hear.
Oh, you can. Are you back? I can hear. I can hear you.
I've been struggling to, but I've heard everything, and I think it was a great meeting. I'm so sorry for interrupting. And
oh, that's okay. I'm glad I can hear you. I think that's we have to get a closing comment from you for sure. Yeah. So I think, again, to the social entrepreneurs, I think this is, again, a collective challenge. So for governments, it's about working towards making the connection between the projected return on investment, that is, thinking about what you're doing at scale and what are the big impacts that you're going to see across communities. So there's two pieces to that. One is an economic one, because we need that incentive to think about the return on investment. So I'd love to see more time and support given to social entrepreneurs who are innovating in education to help them build out that case, because once you have it, the funding's not hard. Seriously, and there are so many good things that have big impacts, from the clear ones, which are impacts on the bottom line for a country's economic prosperity, which you get to reinvest in education and other things. But the other ones are including making massive positive changes to other, health, you name it. There's a range of them. But really helping to assemble those at the very beginning is super important. And the last bit, which I mentioned before, is try and gather some meaningful research behind it. So that get some observations happening to what you're doing, but really purposefully aim it at the pieces of the system that might need changing. So that's really specifically looking at curriculum, or it's looking at just different policy or legislation and thinking, how can we get some observational research that, backs up a change that I'm hoping to incubate, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Thank you so much,
Pleasure.
David. It's such a shame I've lost Mrs. Adefisayo.
Yeah.
Oh, she's there.
Could you hear her?
I'm here. I never left.
But I can't.
No, I'm here.
I can't
what
hear
a pity.
her. Mrs. Adefisayo, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Yes, absolutely.
Oh yeah, and the people on the chat can hear, so you can ask your question to Ngozi. She can answer.
Okay. So please just go ahead and let us know what you think is one thing we must start doing today and one thing we must stop doing as we try to wrap up the session. I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Can you hear me now? No, she can't hear me. What a pity. One thing we should start doing, I think I really enjoyed listening to David and his talk about collaboration. I think we need to collaborate more. Government needs to collaborate with the private sector, because many of the things that I talked about, that I said that we did, we couldn't have done by ourselves. We did it in collaboration with a lot of partners. We had partners who owned radio stations. We had partners who owned partners, and we had banks as partners, we had individuals, we had NGOs. It was a huge consortium of people who came together and just said, oh, children in a certain economic bracket need to keep on learning. So I think the main thing is that we have to keep collaborating with the firm. It's one thing that we need, we're not doing enough of it. So I don't know whether I should say start doing it. I think we should start doing it and start collaborating. And I think it has started, because this is the second session. I had a session during the week where we talked about marrying town and gown. So I think we are now learning that we need to talk to each other. and find out about research from universities. So that's number one. And what do we need to stop doing? I mean, the opposite, of course, is that we need to stop working in silos. Because what's happening now, and I say this for social entrepreneurs because they come to us a lot with a lot of products, but the products are very similar. And the products are, it's very, like, I have on my table now, maybe about 100 LMS systems. And it's now very difficult. Who's good? Who's not good? I mean, how do we judge? And so I want to ask that maybe we should be more creative. Please forgive me. I'm sure you are very creative. You know, I don't want to get that kind of argument. But can we expand and learn more about what the educational sector really needs at this time? We really need for children to be more creative. We need for our children also to be more collaborative. We need for our children to be able to solve problems and think more critically. We need to deepen our curriculum. It's not deep enough. It's too broad. It's too general. And we need to start getting our students to be critical thinkers so that all assessment, for instance, I would love to see an assessment tool that will help us measure some of these, some of what we like to call the 21st century skills, actually been around forever. You know, how do you assess that a child is being innovative in the classroom? He knows how to solve problems. He knows how to work collaboratively with other people. He knows he's motivated to learn. How do I know whether he's good at learning to learn? And he's a lifelong learner, commitment to learning, you know, all these things. I'm sure it sounds rather abstract, but I would like to have.
I think it's very powerful.
So I think for me, we should stop. We should remove ourselves from that narrow cocoon of LMS, learning management systems, report cards for parents, and so on, and look deeper and say, how can we actually deepen learning? I think that would be more interesting for many of us on the other side of the social entrepreneurship divide. But all said, I'm excited that so many people are into so many solutions. It's a great time to be an educationist, I think. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. And I think that is a great way to tie into David's point on doing research, understanding what the needs are. And I think when you mentioned breaking down the silos, I also sit on that supply side as well. And you see lots of similar solutions. And you wonder if people wouldn't make more progress if we collaborated better, worked better, and broke down the silos. And I think that is a strong message to take away. Bryn said earlier that we need to stop comparing ourselves to other climates. And if you think about some of those solutions that are not fit for purpose, it's because we're thinking about the solutions that work in other parts of the country, but then localizing our solutions, thinking deeply about the cultural context and the communal context as well for some of those solutions would actually be the starting point to find those solutions that will take our region towards meeting our target for 2030. So thank you all. Everyone is asking for another session. I leave that to the Leap Africa team. Obviously, there's a demand here for more juicing out of these amazing speakers that we had at the session today. So I'll just say thank you so much. That I would say is the thank you that people want to have more and more of you. So thank you, Mrs. Adefisayo.
Thank you.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Bryn, for gracing this platform today. It's been wonderful and enlightening just hearing your thoughts and views on the pathways to progress in education. Thank you again, and hopefully you would hear from us on a subsequent session going forward. Thank you. And for our audience, thank you. Sorry for the questions that couldn't be answered. The main stage is on now, so please just click on stage above sessions to get back to the main discussion. Thank you again, and stay safe and stay well.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That was good.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, so we should get, I tell you what, you brought up something really interesting, because there are so many people coming up with solutions. I don't know what it is about LMSs, but everyone's making one these days.
It's a learning management system, yes.
Yeah. But I always love starting conversations with governments and folk in a room together. around the things, as you said, which are your real core needs. And most often it's how the heck do we take amazing teachers and just spread that around everywhere? Because if you've got 70% of your entire budget tied up in that quality resource, that's your resource. If we can transform the biggest part of your budget, and by the way, it's the most powerful effect in education, and it's still never going to be replaced by a computer, no human teacher, who's especially amazing ones. We are so far from ever replacing them. So, really putting that to our innovators and saying, you know what, here's my problem. I've got communities that are many, many hundreds of miles, thousands of miles away from infrastructure. And although we might have put, internet there or electricity, that's fine. But how do we attract talent? How do we attract the best teachers? How do we deliver quality teachers out to that remote location? Maybe it's not very attractive. How do we change that? So these are much better questions to throw at these clever people because they're super hard to solve. They're really hard. But of course, they're fantastic for your outcome. And just give them a laundry list. Here are the list of, high prize challenges that are facing, our education system. Please help, and make that the point.
Thank you. That was a great remark. I agree, because we have about 35,000 teachers, but they are not enough, and and it's difficult to get teachers into certain parts of the state, maybe far away, waterlogged communities, what we call riverine communities. So they don't have teachers. So how can we teach the children there? And yet we know there's a lot of talent going to waste in such communities. I think technology, we are working with an organization that is talking about deploying cloud technology, because they also don't have access to any, even if you give them radios, they cannot pick signal. Signals don't get, and so how do we involve these communities? It's been a very, very major point as well.
I think, and look, again, I'm often in conversations where it starts. So David, tell us what sort of technology we should put in. And I say, why are you asking me that question? I've got no background. And often the conversation winds up being, can I just tell you that your solution is going to be teachers and quality teaching, and in stage 1, stage 2, and stage 3, you might be looking at technology. And I often use the example of Japan, who, by the way, just now, because not because they should do it, but because their country is super aging, that means their population is getting really, really old, and so they're being forced to think about the lives of their people. So their technology that's coming into their classrooms, like as we speak, for every child they're getting a computer, but there's a lot less children, and they have had one of the best education systems, I guess, in terms of output in modern history, and they actually had no computers in their classroom. Basically, they have some computers somewhere for teaching technology, but it wasn't used to teach. They just had very high standards of teacher training and things like that, relatively speaking. Not without their flaws, but so it's just a really highly technological society, very wealthy, has a very strong education system, and up until this point, very little computers or technology in it. So I think, I always say that do these fundamentals, use technology certainly to solve your quality teaching challenges, but figure out how it exactly helps that. I certainly can think of examples around remote learning where, and you've even got global opportunities. If you've got sometimes inspiration's a great part of teaching, and broadening your view on teaching is a modern example of how we think about learning, right? So when you talk about those soft skills, which, by the way, every company like mine is desperate for people with those skills right now. That's how you get hired. I don't have any technology degree to my name. In fact, I didn't finish my degree, and I'm an exec. And because the currency is your capability to be a lifelong learner. So a lot of the stuff that I'm valued for, I've picked up along the way. So yeah, again, so how can we sort of not necessarily use technology, but how can you get innovators to come in and help change your curriculum, for example? That's a thing. Yeah, I'm a big fan of that. So I think you should work up a list for these guys and gals, a list of things that really are the big problems with very hard or unavailable answers. And then also think about the implications. So what are the implications short and long term for not addressing it? You know, which obviously gets a little bit politically sensitive because you don't really want to be telling everyone things are terrible and it's going down. But I think it's honest to say, if we don't fix it, it has these sorts of projected implications. And then on the other side, the positive is, and we're keen to understand the positive implications if we do fix it, because that gives that political will to people you need to support you. Because I mean, people in your position, educators, the people doing the angels of education like yourself, who are deeply involved in delivering it, we need to actually come around you and support you. But you tend to get that in greater amounts when we've got that quantification of implication, you know, positive and negative. We get people motivated. COVID-19 did a great job of causing immense focus on implication, negative. So no one's running away from that fire. They're going, well, I can't hide anywhere. I have to fix it. So yeah, but hopefully that helps.
Okay.
I'm available to help out. So
yes, we all have to get together outside this, because it looks like our session is going on, and I'm getting prompts to let people go back to the main stage. And I think more people are joining this private discussion. So, Mr. Defesha, you know, we've been trying to get our hands on you. Kemi has been trying to get her hands on you. It's been tough trying to.
I'm open.
It's been tough.
Nope. I disagree.
But now that I know you're at home, I'll probably just bombard you.
Monday, it's all over. Today is my last day of rest.
It's all over. Fantastic.
I just did a break. Yeah. And I spent fantastic working anyway. So
yes.
Call me now. You have my number.
Yes, ma, I'll call you.
And if you don't,
I'll call you. Thank you.
Is on the open internet.
I have your number. Actually. I'll give you a call, because I know Kemi we're trying to track you down.
Okay.
Yeah.
But no worries. Thank you.
We'll stop being naughty. We'll stop being naughty now and let people
yes. We're off. So please, if you are still on this session, people are still joining the session. Please go to the main stage.
Okay.
Please go to